Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, glancing at the clock on his garage wall. It was already past 6 in the evening, and his 8-year-old daughter Emma would be wondering where he was. The small auto repair shop he ran from his backyard garage barely made enough to cover their basic needs, but it was honest work and it allowed him to be home when Emma got back from school. The past 3 years had been a constant struggle since his wife Sarah passed away from cancer. Marcus had to learn everything from scratch: cooking, braiding hair, helping with homework, and somehow keeping his business afloat while being both mother and father to Emma. Some days felt impossible, like trying to hold water in his bare hands. He was closing up the garage when he heard a car sputtering and coughing down the street. The engine sounds were so bad that Marcus winced, knowing whoever was driving was in serious trouble. The car limped into view, an old Honda Civic that had seen better days, steam rising from under the hood like a small volcano. The car barely made it to his driveway before dying completely. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman, in her 30s, wearing scrubs that suggested she worked at the hospital. Her face showed the kind of exhaustion Marcus recognized all too well, the look of someone carrying too much weight on their shoulders. "Excuse me," she called out, approaching him cautiously. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my car just died. I saw your garage sign and I was hoping maybe you could take a look. I know it's late and you're probably closing up." Marcus studied her for a moment. She had kind eyes, even though they were filled with worry. Her scrubs were wrinkled, suggesting she'd just finished a long shift. Something about her reminded him of Sarah, not in appearance, but in the way she carried herself with quiet strength despite obvious struggles. "What seems to be the problem?" Marcus asked, walking over to the Honda. "It's been making terrible noises for weeks," she explained, wrapping her arms around herself as the evening air grew cooler. "The temperature gauge keeps going into the red, and now it just stopped running completely. I'm Rachel, by the way. Rachel Martinez." "Marcus Thompson," he replied, lifting the hood. Steam billowed out and he immediately saw the problem. The radiator hose had burst and coolant was everywhere. It wasn't a catastrophic repair, but it would need parts and time. Two things that probably meant a lot to someone in scrubs at this hour. "How bad is it?" Rachel asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Marcus examined the engine more thoroughly, checking various components. The radiator hose was the main issue, but he also noticed the coolant was low, the radiator cap was corroded, and the thermostat probably needed replacing too. It was the kind of cascade failure that happened when regular maintenance got deferred too long, usually because of money. "The radiator hose burst," he explained. "That's what caused the overheating and the steam. I can fix it, but I'll need to order the parts. Won't be cheap, probably around $300 for parts and labor." Rachel's face fell, and she closed her eyes for a moment. "I don't have $300 right now," she said quietly. "I'm a single mom, working double shifts at the hospital just to keep up with rent and my son's expenses. Is there any way to do a temporary fix? Something to get me through until my next paycheck?" Marcus understood that desperation intimately. He remembered the early days after Sarah died, when every unexpected expense felt like a mountain he couldn't climb. Emma had needed new school shoes and he'd had to choose between those and fixing their washing machine. These weren't choices anyone should have to make, but life sometimes demanded them anyway. "I could do a temporary patch," Marcus said slowly, "but it won't last long. Maybe a week if you're lucky. And you'll need to check the coolant levels constantly." "That would help so much," Rachel said, relief evident in her voice. "What would that cost?" Marcus looked at her tired face, at the way she clutched her purse tightly, and made a decision. "Don't worry about it. I'll patch it up tonight and you can pay me when you get the proper repair done." Rachel shook her head immediately. "I can't let you do that. You don't even know me. Let me pay you something." "Really, it's fine," Marcus insisted, already heading into his garage for the temporary repair materials, but Rachel was already digging through her purse. She pulled out a small paper bag and held it out to him. "I packed an extra sandwich for my break today, but didn't get a chance to eat it. It's turkey and cheese, nothing fancy, but it's homemade. Please take it. I know it's not much, but I can't let you work for nothing." Marcus looked at the simple paper bag in her outstretched hand. There was something about the gesture that touched him deeply. Not the sandwich itself, but what it represented. In a world where people often looked out only for themselves, here was someone who insisted on giving something even when she had so little. "All right," he said, accepting the sandwich. "But only if you let me get this fixed properly for you at cost. No labor charges when you come back." Rachel's eyes welled up with tears. "You don't know what this means to me. I start my shift at 6 tomorrow morning, and I was panicking about how I'd get to work." Marcus spent the next hour working on the temporary repair, using a patch kit and some sealant to close the burst hose. It wasn't elegant, but it would hold for a short time. As he worked, Rachel sat on an old crate nearby, and they talked quietly. She told him about her 12-year-old son David, how they'd moved here 6 months ago for her job at the hospital. She was a nurse in the pediatric ward, working extra shifts to save money for a down payment on a small house. She wanted David to have stability, a place to call home after years of moving between apartments. When Marcus finished, he started the car and let it run, checking for leaks. The temporary fix held, and the temperature gauge stayed in the normal range. "This should get you through the week," he said, wiping his hands clean. "But don't push it too hard, and keep some extra coolant in the car." Rachel thanked him repeatedly as she prepared to leave. As her car disappeared down the street, Marcus realized he was still holding the paper bag with the sandwich. He smiled, thinking about the unexpected encounter and the reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Marcus woke up the next morning to find Emma sitting at their small kitchen table, trying to brush her own hair before school. Her attempts had resulted in more tangles than smooth strokes, and frustration was written all over her 8-year-old face. "Here, let me help with that," Marcus said, gently taking the brush from her hands. As he worked through the knots, he thought about Rachel's sandwich from the night before. It had been simple but delicious, the kind of meal made with care rather than convenience. It reminded him how long it had been since someone had done something thoughtful for him. "Daddy, are we poor?" Emma asked suddenly, the question catching Marcus off guard. He paused in brushing her hair. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Jenny's mom said we must be poor since you have to work in the garage instead of an office like her dad. And because my shoes have holes in them, and I heard you talking on the phone about the electric bill." Marcus felt his heart sink. He'd been so focused on keeping things together that he hadn't realized how much Emma was picking up on their financial struggles. He finished her hair and knelt down to look her in the eyes. "We might not have as much money as some families," he said carefully, "but we're rich in other ways. We have each other, we have our little house, and we have people who care about us. Sometimes grown-ups have to work extra hard to take care of the people they love." Emma nodded solemnly, then hugged him tight. "I love you, Daddy, even if we are poor." After dropping Emma at school, Marcus spent the morning working on Mrs. Henderson's old Buick, trying to push thoughts of unpaid bills out of his mind. The work helped him focus, gave him something concrete he could fix when so many other things in his life felt broken. Around noon, he heard a car pull into his driveway. Looking up, he was surprised to see Rachel's Honda, the same car he'd patched up the night before. His first thought was that the repair had failed, but when Rachel got out, she didn't look distressed. Instead, she was carrying a large paper bag and wearing a smile. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said as she approached. "I wanted to check if the car was still running okay, and I brought you lunch as a proper thank you." "The car's having problems already?" Marcus asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "No, actually, it's running perfectly. I made it to work this morning with no issues at all, but I felt bad about only giving you that sandwich last night, so I made you a proper meal." She held up the bag. "It's nothing fancy, just some homemade chili and cornbread, but I thought you might be hungry." Marcus was touched by the gesture, but also a bit embarrassed. "You really didn't need to do that. I was just helping a neighbor." "When was the last time someone cooked for you?" Rachel asked directly, tilting her head slightly. The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. He tried to remember but couldn't. Since Sarah died, meals had become purely functional. Sandwiches, cereal, whatever was quick and easy while managing Emma's needs and his work. "I can't remember," he admitted quietly. Then you definitely need this, Rachel said, handing him the bag. I know what it's like trying to do everything alone. My ex-husband left when David was 5, and I spent years thinking I had to handle everything by myself. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses from strangers are what keep us going. As if on cue, Marcus's stomach growled loudly, making them both laugh. He realized he'd been so busy with work that he'd forgotten to eat anything since coffee that morning. Would you like to sit down and eat with me? Marcus asked. I was about to take a break anyway, and it seems silly to eat alone when you're here. They sat on the old picnic table Marcus kept beside the garage, sharing the chili and cornbread. Rachel had been right. It wasn't fancy, but it was delicious and made with obvious care. The chili had just enough spice to be interesting, and the cornbread was perfectly moist. This is incredible, Marcus said between bites. I haven't had a home-cooked meal this good in years. My grandmother's recipe, Rachel explained. She always said food tastes better when it's made with love and shared with good people. They talked easily while they ate. Marcus learned that Rachel had grown up in a small town about 2 hours away, that she'd always wanted to be a nurse, and that she'd been working at the children's hospital for 6 months. She loved her job, especially working with the kids, but the hours were exhausting. What about you? Rachel asked. Have you always been a mechanic? Actually, I was an electrical engineer before, Marcus said. Worked for a big company downtown, wore a tie every day, the whole thing. But when Sarah, my wife, got sick, I needed something more flexible. Started fixing cars as a side job, and after she passed, I just kept doing it. It lets me be here when Emma gets home from school. Rachel nodded, understanding. It's hard, making those kinds of sacrifices, but your daughter is lucky to have a dad who puts her needs first. As they finished eating, Rachel glanced at her watch. I should get going. I have to pick up David from school soon. But Marcus, I want you to know that what you did last night meant everything to me. I was so worried about missing work, about losing my job if my car broke down completely. I'm glad I could help, Marcus said, genuinely meaning it. I'm serious about getting the proper repairs done, Rachel continued. I get paid next Friday. Would that work for you? Whenever you're ready, Marcus assured her. No rush. After Rachel left, Marcus sat alone at the picnic table, looking at the empty containers that had held such a thoughtful meal. For the first time in months, he felt something other than stress about the future. There was something about Rachel, her kindness, her strength, the way she insisted on reciprocating even small gestures, that reminded him there were still good people in the world. That evening, when Emma came home from school, she noticed his improved mood immediately. You seem happy today, Daddy, she observed while doing her homework at the kitchen table. I guess I am, Marcus realized. Sometimes unexpected good things happen when you least expect them. Like what? Like meeting new friends who remind you that there's still kindness in the world, Marcus said, helping Emma with a math problem. Emma smiled up at him. That sounds nice. Can I meet your new friend sometime? Marcus thought about it for a moment. Maybe, he said. We'll see. The following Friday arrived with an unexpected twist. Marcus had just finished replacing the brake pads on a customer's truck when he heard Rachel's Honda pulling into his driveway. But this time, she wasn't alone. A tall 12-year-old boy, with Rachel's dark eyes and serious expression, sat in the passenger seat. Rachel got out first, looking slightly nervous. I hope it's okay that I brought David with me. He wanted to meet the mechanic who helped his mom. Marcus wiped his hands, clean, and walked over to greet them. David climbed out of the car, standing a bit behind his mother but studying Marcus with curious eyes. David, this is Mr. Thompson, the man I told you about, Rachel said gently. Thank you for fixing our car, David said politely, though Marcus could hear the reserved tone that many kids used with new adults. You're welcome, Marcus replied, and you can call me Marcus if that's okay with your mom. Just then the back door of Marcus's house burst open, and Emma came running out, her backpack bouncing as she rushed toward them. She'd heard voices, and with the fearless curiosity of an 8-year-old had come to investigate. Daddy, who are your friends? Emma asked, skidding to a stop near the group. Emma, this is Rachel and her son David. "Rachel, David, this is my daughter Emma." Emma immediately turned to David with the kind of direct friendliness that only children possess. "Do you want to see my treehouse? My daddy built it, and it has a rope ladder and everything." David glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "That sounds cool," he said, and Marcus noticed his reserved demeanor softening slightly. While the kids headed toward the backyard, Rachel and Marcus walked to her car. Marcus lifted the hood and began examining the temporary repair he'd made the week before. As he'd expected, the patch was beginning to show signs of wear. "Perfect timing," he said. "This probably would have failed within a few days." "I'm so glad I made it," Rachel said. "I've been checking the coolant levels every morning like you told me." As Marcus worked on removing the old radiator hose, they could hear the children's voices from the backyard. Emma was explaining the various features of her treehouse with the enthusiasm of a tour guide, while David asked thoughtful questions about how it was built. "She's adorable," Rachel commented, watching Emma through the window. "David doesn't make friends easily. He's pretty shy, but she seems to have a gift for making people feel welcome. She gets that from her mother," Marcus said quietly, focusing on loosening a stubborn clamp. "Sarah always had a way of making everyone feel like they belonged." Rachel was quiet for a moment, then asked gently, "How long has it been?" 3 years this October," Marcus replied. "Cancer, it was fast, which was both a blessing and a curse. Less suffering, but less time to prepare Emma for what was coming." "I'm sorry," Rachel said simply. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "Some days still are," Marcus admitted. "But Emma keeps me going. She's stronger than she knows." As he worked, Rachel told him more about her own journey. She'd been married to David's father for 8 years before he decided family life wasn't for him. He'd left one day while she was at work, taking half their savings and leaving only a note saying he needed freedom to find himself. David took it hard, Rachel explained. He blamed himself for a long time, thought if he'd been a better son, his dad would have stayed. It's taken years of therapy and a lot of patience to help him understand that sometimes adults make selfish choices that have nothing to do with their children. Marcus looked up from the engine. "That's why he seems so serious for his age." "He's had to grow up fast," Rachel agreed, "but he's a good kid. Gets excellent grades, helps around the house, never complains about our situation. Sometimes I worry he's too responsible for a 12-year-old. From the backyard came the sound of laughter. Emma's giggle mixed with what Marcus realized was David's laugh. It was the first time he'd heard the boy express genuine joy since they'd arrived. "Sounds like Emma's working her magic," Marcus said with a smile. They continued talking as Marcus worked, and he found himself appreciating Rachel's company more than he'd expected. She asked intelligent questions about the repair process, genuinely interested in learning how cars worked. When he explained something technical, she listened carefully and asked follow-up questions that showed she was really thinking about what he was telling her. "I've always thought I should learn more about car maintenance," Rachel said as Marcus installed the new radiator hose. "It would save money in the long run, and I hate feeling helpless when something goes wrong. I could teach you some basic things," Marcus offered. "Simple maintenance, how to check fluids, warning signs to watch for. It's not as complicated as most people think." Rachel's face lit up. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" "Not at all. It would actually be nice to have someone interested in learning." As Marcus finished the repair and tested the system, the children came back from their exploration of the yard. David was carrying a small wooden car that Emma had apparently given him as a gift. "Mom, look what Emma made," David said, showing off the toy car. "Her dad taught her how to make them in his workshop." Emma beamed with pride. "It's got wheels that really turn and everything. Daddy says I have good hands for building things." Rachel examined the little wooden car with obvious appreciation. "This is beautiful work, Emma. You're very talented." "David, help me make a new flag for the treehouse," Emma announced. "He's really good at drawing. He made a picture of a dragon that looks totally real." Marcus noticed how David stood a little straighter at Emma's praise, and how Emma seemed to glow from having someone appreciate her handiwork. There was something natural about the way the children had connected, as if they'd found missing puzzle pieces in each other. "Well," Rachel said, checking her watch, "we should probably head home so I can start dinner. What do I owe you for the repair?" Marcus had calculated the cost as they talked, parts and his usual labor rate. But looking at Rachel, at David, clutching Emma's wooden car, at the way this simple interaction had brightened everyone's day, he found himself making another decision. "The parts were $60, he said. "Don't worry about labor." "Marcus, no," Rachel protested immediately. "We talked about this. You can't keep doing work for free." "How about a trade?" Marcus suggested. "You mentioned you'd teach me to cook some of your grandmother's recipes. My cooking skills are pretty limited, and Emma deserves better than sandwiches and cereal all the time." Rachel looked surprised by the suggestion, then smiled slowly. "You really want to learn to cook?" "I really do," Marcus confirmed. "And Emma would love having home-cooked meals more often." "Can David and I come back?" Emma asked hopefully. "We could play again, and maybe I could show him how to use the workshop tools." David looked at his mother with obvious hope in his eyes. "I think that could be arranged," Rachel said, and Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest at the possibility of more afternoons like this one. 3 weeks later, what had started as a simple trade arrangement had evolved into something neither Marcus nor Rachel had expected. Saturday afternoon cooking lessons had become a weekly tradition, with David and Emma playing in the yard while the adults worked in the kitchen. Marcus was discovering that cooking was a lot like mechanical work. It required attention to detail, following steps in the right order, and understanding how different components worked together. Rachel was a patient teacher, showing him how to properly season food, the importance of timing, and how to trust his instincts rather than just following recipes blindly. "The secret to good cooking," Rachel explained, as they prepared her grandmother's pot roast, "is the same as any other skill. You have to care about what you're doing and pay attention to what's happening." Marcus was browning the meat while Rachel prepared vegetables. The kitchen smelled incredible, filled with the aromas of garlic, herbs, and caramelizing onions. Through the window, they could see Emma teaching David how to use a hand drill to make holes in a piece of wood for a project they were working on. "I never thought I'd enjoy cooking this much," Marcus admitted, carefully turning the roast to brown all sides evenly. "Sarah did most of the cooking when she was alive, and after she died, I just focused on survival. Getting food on the table, not making it taste good. Food is one of the ways we take care of people we love," Rachel said, arranging carrots around the roast. "My grandmother used to say that a meal made with attention was like a hug you could taste." The domesticity of the moment struck Marcus. Suddenly, the two of them working together in the kitchen, their children playing safely nearby, the smell of good food cooking slowly. It felt natural in a way that surprised him, like something that could easily become permanent. "Rachel," Marcus started, then hesitated. He'd been thinking about this for days but wasn't sure how to bring it up. "What is it?" she asked, looking up from the vegetables. "I was wondering if you and David would like to come to Emma's school play next Friday. She's playing a tree in the environmental awareness show, and she specifically asked if her new friends could come watch." Rachel's smile was immediate and warm. "She asked for us specifically?" "She's been talking about you and David constantly," Marcus said. "Emma doesn't usually get attached to people quickly, but she's really connected with both of you. I think having you there would mean a lot to her." "Of course we'll come," Rachel said without hesitation. "David would love that too. He's been asking when we'll see Emma again." As they slid the pot roast into the oven, Marcus realized how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for 3 years was gradually being replaced by something he'd almost forgotten existed, the feeling of being part of a family unit, even if it was an unconventional one. Later that evening, after dinner had been shared and cleaned up, the 4 of them sat on Marcus's back porch watching the sunset. David was showing Emma a book about space exploration that he'd brought from home, while Marcus and Rachel talked quietly about their children, work, and dreams for the future. "David seems much happier lately," Rachel observed, watching her son explain the phases of the moon to Emma with animated gestures. "He's been more talkative at home, more willing to try new things. I think having Emma as a friend has been really good for him. Emma's changed too, Marcus replied. She's always been a happy kid, but lately she seems more confident. She told me yesterday that she wants to learn how to change a car's oil because Rachel says it's important to be independent. Rachel laughed softly. I may have mentioned that during one of our cooking lessons. Is that okay? I don't want to overstep with parenting advice. Are you kidding? It's refreshing to have someone else who cares about her development, Marcus said. For 3 years, every decision about Emma has been mine alone. Having another perspective, especially from someone as thoughtful as you, is a gift. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as David helped Emma identify different constellations appearing in the darkening sky. The scene felt so peaceful, so right, that Marcus found himself imagining many more evenings just like this one. Marcus, Rachel said quietly, her voice taking on a more serious tone. I need to tell you something. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, worried that she was about to pull back from whatever was developing between them. What is it? I got some news at work yesterday, Rachel continued. There's an opportunity for me to move into a supervisory position in the pediatric ward. It would mean better hours, better pay, and much more job security. That's wonderful, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure where this was leading. You deserve that kind of recognition. The thing is, Rachel hesitated, it would mean signing a 2-year contract, committing to stay here to build a life in this community. And before I make that decision, I need to know if what's been happening between us with all of us is something real or just a nice temporary arrangement. Marcus felt his heart speed up. The question was direct and honest, typical of Rachel's straightforward nature. She wasn't asking for promises they weren't ready to make, but she needed to know if he saw a future in what they were building together. I've been thinking about the same thing, Marcus admitted. These past few weeks with you and David have been the happiest I've felt since Sarah died. Not just because I'm not lonely anymore, but because it feels like we're creating something genuine together. What does that mean for us? Rachel asked softly. Marcus looked at their children, still absorbed in their conversation about space, then back at Rachel. I think it means we should find out what happens when we stop pretending this is just about cooking lessons and car repairs. Rachel reached over and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. I was hoping you'd say that. From across the porch, Emma looked over and noticed their joined hands. Instead of seeming confused or upset, she broke into a huge grin. David, she whispered loudly. I think my dad likes your mom. David looked over at the adults, then back at Emma with a knowing smile. I think my mom likes your dad too. Does that mean you might become my brother? Emma asked with the hopeful directness that only 8-year-olds possess. David considered this seriously for a moment, then nodded. I think I'd like that. Marcus and Rachel looked at each other with a mixture of surprise and amusement. Leave it to children to cut straight through adult complications and get to the heart of what everyone was really hoping for. Well, Rachel said with a laugh, I guess that settles it. I'm taking the supervisor position. Marcus squeezed her hand, gently, feeling like his life was finally moving toward something bright and hopeful again. I'm really glad you are. 6 months after that evening on the porch, Marcus found himself standing in his bedroom at 5 a.m, staring at a letter that had arrived the day before. His hands shook slightly as he read it for the 3rd time, trying to process what it meant for the new life he'd been building. The letter was from Henderson Engineering, the company he'd worked for before Sarah's illness forced him to change careers. They were offering him his old position back, with a significant promotion and salary increase. The money would solve every financial worry he'd had for the past 3 years. Emma could have new clothes, music lessons, college savings. They could move to a bigger house in a better neighborhood, but accepting the job would mean leaving the garage, leaving the flexible schedule that let him be present for Emma, and most importantly, leaving Rachel and David just as their relationship had begun to flourish into something beautiful and stable. Marcus sat heavily on his bed, running his hands through his hair. The practical side of him knew the smart choice was obvious. Take the job, secure Emma's future, worry about romance later. But the thought of walking away from Rachel made his chest ache in a way he hadn't expected. A soft knock on his bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. "Daddy, are you okay?" Emma's voice was concerned. "Come in, sweetheart," Marcus called, quickly folding the letter. Emma padded into the room in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. "I heard you walking around. Did you have a bad dream?" Marcus pulled her onto the bed beside him, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. "No bad dreams. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff." "Is it about Rachel and David?" Emma asked, with the perceptiveness that often surprised him. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you get a special face when you think about them," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "Like you're happy, but also worried at the same time." Marcus couldn't help but smile at his daughter's observation skills. "You're right, I am thinking about them." "Are you going to marry Rachel?" Emma asked directly. The question caught Marcus off guard. While he and Rachel had grown much closer over the past months, they hadn't discussed marriage explicitly. But Emma's question made him realize that somewhere in his heart, he'd already begun imagining that possibility. "Would you like that?" Marcus asked carefully. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Rachel makes you laugh again like you used to with Mommy. And David is like the big brother I always wanted. Plus, Rachel taught me how to make pancakes that don't stick to the pan." Marcus hugged Emma closer, touched by her acceptance and excitement. "Those are all good reasons." "So you will marry her?" Emma pressed. "It's not that simple, sweetheart. There are some things I have to figure out first." Later that morning, after dropping Emma at school, Marcus called Rachel and asked if they could meet for coffee. Something in his tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because she immediately rearranged her schedule to meet him. They sat in a quiet corner of the local diner, steaming mugs between them. Marcus had been trying to find the right words to explain the situation, but Rachel's direct approach made the conversation easier. "What's wrong?" she asked simply. "You look like someone who didn't sleep well." Marcus pulled the letter from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Rachel read it quickly, her expression growing more serious with each line. "This is a big opportunity," she said finally, looking up at him. "The salary alone would change everything for you and Emma." "It would," Marcus agreed. "But taking it would mean giving up the garage, going back to corporate life, probably working 60-hour weeks again." "And leaving us," Rachel added quietly. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the letter. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. "You have to take it," she said. "Rachel, no, that's not what I want." "Marcus, listen to me," Rachel interrupted gently. "I care about you too much to let you make a decision based on a relationship that's only 6 months old. Emma is your priority, and this job could secure her entire future. You can't pass that up for me." "But what about us? What about what we've been building together?" Rachel reached across the table and took his hand. "What we have is real, but it's not worth sacrificing Emma's future. If we're meant to be together, we'll find a way to make it work." Marcus felt tears threaten. Long-distance relationships rarely work, especially with kids involved. "Then we'll have to beat the odds," Rachel said with a small smile. "David and I have been talking about moving anyway. Maybe this is the push we need to consider relocating to wherever this job takes you." "You can't uproot David's life for me," Marcus protested. "He's finally settled here, doing well in school." "Let me worry about David," Rachel said firmly. "He's more resilient than you think, and honestly, the idea of starting fresh somewhere new has appeal. We could have a real adventure, all 4 of us." Marcus stared at her, amazed by her strength and generosity. Here was a woman who had worked so hard to build stability for herself and her son, and she was willing to risk it all to support his opportunity. "I can't ask you to do that," Marcus said softly. "You're not asking." "I'm offering," Rachel replied, "because that's what people do when they love each other. They make sacrifices and take risks together. The word love hung in the air between them. The first time either had said it aloud, Marcus felt his heart race as the full weight of what Rachel was suggesting sank in. "You love me?" he asked quietly. Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't look away. "Yes, I do. I love the way you put Emma first in every decision you make. I love how patient you are when teaching her new things. I love that you fixed my car for a sandwich because that's just the kind of person you are. And I love that you've shown David what a good father looks like." Marcus stood up and moved to the chair beside her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you too, Rachel. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you make everything feel possible. I love how you've brought joy back into our lives." They sat together in the busy diner, holding hands and making plans that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Rachel would give her supervisor position notice, explaining that her family was relocating. David would finish out the school year, and they would move over the summer. "What if this doesn't work?" Marcus asked, voicing the fear that lurked beneath his excitement. "Then we'll figure it out together," Rachel said. "That's what families do." That evening, they sat both children down to explain the situation. Emma was thrilled at the prospect of moving to a new city and having David and Rachel come with them. David was more hesitant initially, worried about leaving his school and the few friends he'd made. "I know it's scary to start over," Rachel told her son, "but think about all the new possibilities. New places to explore, new people to meet, and you'll have Emma and Marcus with you through all of it." "Will we live in the same house?" David asked. Marcus and Rachel exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed the living arrangements yet, but the question forced them to confront the practical realities of their situation. "We'll find a place where we can all be together," Marcus said carefully. "Maybe a house with enough room for everyone to have their own space." "Like a real family?" Emma asked hopefully. "Like a real family," Rachel confirmed, and Marcus felt something settle into place in his chest, a sense of rightness he'd thought he'd never experience again. 2 weeks later, Marcus called Henderson Engineering and accepted their offer. The new position would start in 2 months, giving them time to make arrangements and plan their move. Rachel gave notice at the hospital, receiving surprising support from her supervisor, who understood the importance of following opportunities for family stability. As they began making concrete plans for their new life together, Marcus realized that sometimes the most important transformations came not from grand gestures or dramatic moments, but from simple acts of kindness that opened doors to unexpected possibilities. A broken-down car and a simple sandwich had led to a complete reshaping of 4 lives, proving that meaningful change often began with the smallest steps toward helping another person. The night before Marcus's last day at the garage, he and Rachel stood in the backyard watching Emma and David roast marshmallows over a small fire pit. The garage that had been his refuge and livelihood for 3 years would soon belong to someone else, but he felt no sadness about leaving it behind. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked, slipping her hand into his. "Terrified," Marcus admitted with a laugh. "But also excited. For the first time in years, I feel like we're moving toward something instead of just trying to survive day by day." "Together," Rachel said softly. "Together," Marcus agreed, and pulled her close as they watched their children laugh and plan adventures for their new life as a family. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of their new house watching through the window as Rachel helped Emma with her science project in the backyard, while David practiced shooting baskets at the hoop Marcus had installed last spring. The suburban Denver neighborhood had welcomed their unconventional family with warmth, and the children had adapted to their new schools better than anyone had dared hope. The engineering job had exceeded every expectation. Marcus found himself energized by the intellectual challenges and the collaborative environment, while the substantial salary increase had eliminated the financial stress that had shadowed his life for so long. Emma was taking piano lessons, David had joined the school robotics team, and Rachel had found a position at Children's Hospital Denver that she absolutely loved. But the real transformation hadn't been professional or financial. It had been personal. Marcus had learned to trust in happiness again, to believe that good things could last instead of waiting for the other shoe to drop. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Marcus glanced at the caller ID and smiled, recognizing the number of his old neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who still lived near his former garage. "Marcus, dear, how are you?" Her familiar voice crackled through the phone. "I'm doing wonderful, Mrs. Henderson. How are things back home?" "Oh, you know, same old neighborhood. But I'm calling because something interesting happened today that I thought you'd want to hear about." Marcus settled into a kitchen chair, curious. Mrs. Henderson had a talent for neighborhood gossip, but she usually had good instincts about what was actually worth sharing. "You remember that young man who bought your garage? Tommy Rodriguez?" Marcus did remember. Tommy had been fresh out of technical school, eager to start his own business but short on experience. Marcus had spent several days showing him the ropes before moving to Denver. "Of course, how's he doing?" "That's what I wanted to tell you about. Today I was getting my car inspected there, and I couldn't believe the transformation. He's got 3 mechanics working for him now, and the place was busier than I've ever seen it. But here's the remarkable part. He's got a whole program set up." "What kind of program?" "He's training single mothers basic car maintenance for free. Every Saturday morning, he teaches them how to check their oil, change a tire, identify warning signs. He says it's his way of paying forward the kindness you showed him when you practically gave him the business for half what it was worth." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. When he'd sold the garage to Tommy, he'd intentionally set the price low, knowing the young man had more ambition than capital. He'd never expected that gesture to ripple outward into something larger. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson continued. "He's also got a sliding scale for repairs based on people's ability to pay. He told me that a mechanic named Marcus Thompson taught him that sometimes fixing someone's car is about more than just the money." After hanging up the phone, Marcus sat quietly in his kitchen, thinking about the unexpected ways that kindness could multiply and spread. He'd helped Tommy, not expecting anything in return, just as he'd helped Rachel that first evening. Now, Tommy was helping others who would probably help still others in turn. Rachel came through the back door, her hair pulled back in a ponytail and dirt on her jeans from the garden project. "Who was on the phone?" she asked, washing her hands at the sink. Marcus told her about Mrs. Henderson's call, about Tommy's success and his program for single mothers. Rachel listened with the smile that always appeared when Marcus shared stories about unexpected kindness. "That's beautiful," she said, drying her hands and moving to stand behind his chair, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. "But not surprising. Good people inspire good people." "I never thought about it that way," Marcus said, leaning back against her. "When you helped me that night, you didn't just fix my car. You showed me that there were still people in the world who would go out of their way to help a stranger. That changed how I saw things, how I interact with other people. I'm sure I've passed that forward in ways I don't even realize." Marcus turned in his chair to look up at her. Even after 2 years together, Rachel still had the ability to surprise him with her insights. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if your car hadn't broken down that night?" he asked. Rachel laughed softly. "Actually, I have a confession to make about that." Marcus raised an eyebrow, curious. "My car had been making those noises for 2 weeks before it finally died. I kept putting off getting it fixed because I couldn't afford it. The night it broke down in your driveway, I'd been driving around for an hour, trying to will it to make it home. When I saw your garage sign, I actually said a little prayer that you'd be kind enough to help me." "So you were looking for help when you found me," Marcus said thoughtfully. "And you were ready to give help when I found you," Rachel replied. "Maybe that's how the best things happen. Not through coincidence, but through people being prepared to recognize and respond to opportunities for connection." Emma and David burst through the back door at that moment, their science project completed and their energy levels still high despite the long afternoon of work. "Dad, can we have a movie night tonight?" Emma asked, still calling Marcus Dad, with the enthusiasm she'd shown since Rachel had officially become her stepmother 6 months earlier. "What movie are you thinking?" Marcus asked. "Something with space adventures," David suggested. His fascination with astronomy had only grown since that first evening on Marcus's old porch. "I think we can arrange that," Rachel said. "But first, baths for both of you. You're covered in dirt and grass stains." As the children headed upstairs, arguing good-naturedly about who got to use the bathroom first, Marcus and Rachel began preparing dinner together. It was a routine they'd developed over the past 2 years, this comfortable dance of shared responsibility and easy conversation. "I got some news today," Rachel said as she started chopping vegetables for a salad. "Good news, I hope?" "The hospital offered me the head of pediatric nursing position. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, and a chance to implement some programs I've been thinking about." Marcus paused in his preparation of the chicken they were having for dinner. "That's incredible, Rachel. You deserve that recognition." "I want to start a program similar to what Tommy's doing with single mothers, but focused on healthcare education for single parents, teaching them how to handle minor medical situations, when to worry and when not to worry. Basic first aid. So many parents feel overwhelmed when their kids get sick or injured." Marcus set down his knife and turned to face her fully. "You want to teach people to take care of their families better. Just like you taught Tommy to take care of people's cars, and he's teaching others. It's all connected, isn't it? When we help people become more capable and confident, they pass that strength on to others." That evening, as they watched a movie about space exploration with their children curled up between them on the couch, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple decision to help a stranger whose car had broken down, continued with the willingness to accept help in return, and had grown into something that was transforming not just their own lives but radiating outward to touch others they'd never even meet. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder during the movie, while David dozed against Rachel's side. Marcus looked at his wife and felt the same sense of wonder he'd experienced that first night when she'd insisted on giving him a sandwich in exchange for his help. "Thank you," he whispered to Rachel in the darkened room. "For what?" she whispered back. "For showing me that accepting help is just as important as giving it. For teaching me that real families can be built in all kinds of ways. For being brave enough to take risks for love." Rachel smiled and reached over the sleeping children to squeeze his hand. "Thank you for fixing my car for a sandwich, and for everything that came after." Outside their window, the neighborhood was quiet and peaceful, filled with families settling in for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to help and be helped, to love and be loved, to continue the endless cycle of kindness that had started with one broken-down Honda and one generous heart. Marcus closed his eyes and listened to the steady breathing of his family, feeling grateful for every choice that had led them to this moment, and excited for all the ways their story would continue to unfold.